4. A family meal. My attention should have been on Stormskeep's annals. I should have been continuing my search for a way to avoid ascension, as I still felt too young, too naive, and too broken to assume the position. Yet my eyes had grown tired of reading scripts in the library's dim light. I needed to be outside, to feel the fresh air, and to be able to call a cyclone to life if I wished, and to work out my frustration over losing my childhood friend. True, there existed no space in Stormskeep large enough for a storm as grand as I longed to call. I settled for the open sanctuary at the Citadel, where the balconies curved around and offered views of Sunday Falls, the castle itself, and an expansive park a level down the mountainside. I paced, fondling the tokens I kept on a chain close to my heart, one cold and one hot, one from my mother and one from my father. I walked back and forth along the railing. Worry over what seemed would be my fate, whether I wished it or not, gnawed at me. Tasmin, servant of the goddess Selene, approached. "Lady Mairynne, the acolytes have brought a tray of fruit and cheese. Is there aught that I may do for you? Something to ease your broken heart, perhaps?" Her eyes held all the benevolence of the gods, but little in the way of solution. With a sigh, I stopped and gathered her hands in my own. "I cannot think of anything you may do to change my course. You are not at liberty to leave this place and search for father any more than I am, though I appreciate the sentiment." When she departed, I leaned onto the railing overlooking the open field below. Stormskeep's guards trained. Face after soldier's face paired off in combat, each wielding a unique weapon. When my gaze traveled to the far end, I spied the very person I longed to see. Thalaja. No other soldier in the Arashi Guard moved in the same manner, a style he'd perfected during his time with the Unseen, using weapons others had always failed to master. I watched him work dual blades against his opponent. The short, curved scimitines reflected Otar's light as Thalaja executed twists, slashes, and blocks, the blades seemingly an extension of the person himself. But clearly, he went easier on his opponent than his skill would allow. He made a final parry, with the curved blades crossed over his head. They parted and bowed to each other. Then he sheathed his curved daggers. Mayhap he felt that I watched, because he turned and lifted his face to where I stood. Across long space, we connected with our eyes alone, until he gave a single nod, said a few words to his sparring mate, and strode off the field. The other soldiers continued to spar, and I moved away from the railing and back several times in my course of pacing, each time scanning those sparring to see if he'd returned to the field. Mayhap an hour had passed when a cool breeze preceded his silent arrival at my side, a whisper that let me know he approached. I could scarcely contain the urge to ask what his network may have learned, so by way of greeting I asked, "What news?" as I hurried toward him, wondering of both Jessa and the errand I'd sent him upon regarding father. He stopped, lowering his eyes as he answered, "Senti Summergall cannot find cause for your servant's death. The attendants have taken Jessamine Feathergalla's body to the common pyre fields." My heart dove at the news of my friend. "When do they plan the pyre?" "Tomorrow." I nodded. "I'll be there." "Regarding the other matter, there is hope," he said. As if lifted then by the wind, my soul soared. With news of hope, I felt lighter in my mourning robes than I had since father's sudden disappearance. I laid a hand on my guard's arm and smiled. My next words tumbled forward. "Wonderful to hear. Whatever knowledge you have gained will aid in the plight. Will you share the news? I've asked Karine to gather a party to begin the search." Thalaja's expression turned to stone. I searched his face. "You disagree with my choice to arrange the search party?" "You will be my empress. I'm not at liberty to disagree," he answered, slipping from under my touch. Scoffing at the propriety, I snapped, "That I will become empress? against all I desire, holds no power over your right to agree or disagree."
"That is not the common opinion, Mairynne."
His temper and tone remained even, no hint of accusation entering his words, only fact. I lost a bit of fuel as I said, "Well, it is mine." Lips pressed tightly together, he gave a small, unconvincing nod.
"I'll speak with your sister as you wish. I do have some thoughts on who might be a wise choice to go in search of Tenyo Azarine."
This course of conversation seemed sound enough, as I sorely wanted to know what he'd learned from his shadowy spies. "Will you tell me the details?" As his ruler, I had the right to ask or even demand the information, yet I did so with caution, aware that he kept the secrets of the unseen guild close to his chest. The ask didn't seem to offend, and he answered easily.
"My sources said we should approach the Sinti."
The mention of the notorious nomadic people, the Nantai wanderers of the grasslands, shocked me back into pacing. He watched with his classic stone-jawed stoicism as I processed all that this might mean. At length, I returned to him with arms folded across my chest. "What you say is impossible. No one finds the Sinti. They are the ones who find the people they wish."
"Your concerns are well noted, Lady Mairynne. Even in my network, there are no known ways to find the Sinti when they cast sim over their caravans, though the information still offers some slight hope."
He clasped his hands behind his back, a soldier's restful position. I clenched my teeth, released, and said, "That is not what I'd call hope." Any optimism faded fast as I looked away, my vision blurring behind angry tears. This wasn't how a leader should behave, certainly not the demeanor of an empress. I cursed the tears that presently revealed little more than my youth.
"Mairynne,"
Thalaja said softly, and stepped close enough that I felt his cool presence again.
"Come here."
He wouldn't take me into his arms without my consent. Understanding that the command reflected more invitation than demand, I went, heedless of propriety. And once in his arms, my tears flowed. Soothingly, he said,
"Crying over your father, and after you lost a friend of many years, does not make you weak. And yes, hope does remain."
I chuckled at that. Even though he was a guard and considered beneath my stature, he knew me better than most. I pulled away, swept my hands under my eyes, and asked, "How? How is it possible to find these hidden people?"
"There are rumors of a totem held by the small folk of Umbra within the Evernight marshes. Rumor holds that this trinket has the power to allow its holder to see through a Sinti sim."
I gasped, recalling the story Nadia had shared of Kareen and the rumors of the small folk. "Do we have anyone who can navigate the marshes and withstand whatever dangers they pose? I worry about assigning someone unfamiliar with such a place to the search party." A thought he clearly didn't wish to voice pulled his gaze from mine. "Thalaja?" I asked, ducking to regain eye contact. "What are you considering?"
"I know of no other person who has entered and returned from the marshes, aside from me."
Pinching the bridge of my nose in suspicion of another dead end, I asked, "So if there is no one, what do you suggest instead?" He made no reply. I inhaled sharply, my voice just as sharp as I pressed, "What are you suggesting, Thalaja?" If he felt an urge to flinch away from my appalled question, I'd have never known. Instead, his words remained level.
"I think you know the answer to that question."
"No," I commanded. "There must be another way. I cannot be without you to lead my guard." But there was so much more twisting around in my mind. "I cannot ask you to face this danger, and I cannot be without the hope for us," I didn't say. Weaker then, I questioned. "I've lost so much already, and now you'd leave me too?" A glimmer flashed in his dark, slanted eyes, but after examining my face, he reapplied his solemn mask.
I have already spoken with Tarline. He will assume leadership of the guard in my stead. I'd trust him with my life, and you can rest easy doing the same."
He swallowed, then added,
"It may also do us some good to be apart."
"For what reason would separation do us good?"
"Again, I believe you ask for answers you already know."
Thalaja spoke truly, yet I disagreed. Through gritted teeth, I said, "I want to hear you say it."
"My blood is impure, and for us to be together would contaminate you. The Nantai people are slow to change, and I fear they would not tolerate such a declaration, even from their empress. It flies in the face of the caste system. By blood, I am as much frost fighter of the 4th caste as I am storm sorcerer."
He paused and sighed.
"Mairynne, I feel us growing closer. I sense your desire to deepen that, but
He shook his head.
I just can't."
Ill within my very core, I spun from him and resumed the path I'd been pacing. To further my dismay, I did understand the reason in Thalaja's logic. Or mayhap I suspected it ran deeper, and that he wouldn't share hurt even more. When I'd exhausted my immediate frustration, I sat on the kneeler at Selen's altar, face lifted toward the sky as if to ask why, and said, "Well, and so," defeat resounding in the small customary acceptance. It was as much as I could muster. Thalaja came to me, near enough that I felt a chill, but taking care not to touch.
"I will update you after I speak with Lady Carey."
He turned both my hands upward and placed a kiss on each palm, a symbol of servitude to a ruler of the people. He then bowed to me and left. I cried. And afterward, while upon that kneeler, long hours passed in stillness, so many that night had transpired by the time I gathered my wits and stood. Anger constricted around my chest, more so than the heavy belting. And I'd come to a decision there at Selen's altar, and it was a plain one. I had to find a way to break free of all these barriers and make the things I desired happen. I went to Nadia's cottage, still within the castle's grounds, but apart from the main keep and the wings where the royal family resided. Gifted to her by my mother, who wanted her twin close, it stood inside a swath of greenery and flowers. When I knocked, Corwine answered, wearing his evening's attire and a mask of concern. I breezed past him without greeting and into the sitting room where my aunt lounged. "Nadia," I said urgently, "tomorrow, we must figure out a way to change the course of things. Time is running out, and I won't become empress. I cannot. I am not ready. The only option is to find my father and restore his reign. But we must find something in the annals that lawfully allows for this." Nadia stood, a sheathed dress flowing along her long limbs as she came to me. She and my late mother both stood a head taller than me. My sister Careen had their height. Yasmin favored the women of my father's blood, and I fell somewhere in between. I wished for that height, as it seemed to give Careen a confidence I longed to possess, but did not.
"Dear Mairynne, we are looking as fast as we can. Why has it become so urgent this evening?"
my aunt asked. I hung my head. "Thalaja wants to lead the party we will send in search of father. They must travel into the Evernight." Nadia sighed and exchanged a knowing look with Corwine. She placed an arm around my shoulders, guiding me gently in the direction of her long sofa. We sat. "Maybe we should go tonight," I said, urgency coursing through my blood. "We still have 4 ages of royal decrees to read. How are we ever going to get through all that and find a lawful solution before I must go through Ascension?" Corwine cleared his throat.
"If I may, Lady Mairynne."
He waited until I nodded for him to continue, then said,
"My cousin, Solarine, supports your plight. I believe she showed as much at your council meeting. She's aged and wise, and may be able to offer some advice, if you would allow me to beg her help."
Though I remained uncertain how she might be able to help, the thought was still an unexpected delight. "Of course, Corwine," I said. "I can use all the willing help available." Nadia grabbed and squeezed my hand. "We'll find an answer tomorrow. I feel it." I turned to my aunt. "We must. I cannot shake the feeling that father lives, and I intend to have him returned to Arashi and Stormskeep so he may resume his rightful position upon the Serpentine Throne." I stood. "And somehow, some way, I intend to accompany Thalaja on the journey to bring him back." I'd grown sleepy at Nadia's cottage and stayed in her guest rooms for the night. The following morning, Corwine left us at dawn, and my aunt's housemaid Laurine prepared plates of fruit and bread and served barley tea at its side. After Nadia and I had broken our fast, Solarine Donsgal arrived on the patio at Corwine's side on a gust of wind. Her hair settled over one shoulder, the cream-colored waves unexpectedly tame. She came to me with a grin and one hand forward. I accepted, my hand open to the sky, and she laid a kiss upon my palm. As she raised her head and ice-clear eyes found mine, she said, "I began to believe you wouldn't ask for help, young one. Imagine my delight to receive my dear brother just as Otar arrived this morning." "Thank you for coming, Solarine." I'd redressed that morning with the help of Laurine, my aunt's handmaiden. "Corwine," she continued, "was right to suggest you seek my help. I've studied our royal histories for many years, and your father's royal council was the third on which I've served." She looked beyond me. Nadia circled from behind our breakfast table and gave Solarine a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Solarine asked, "Have you finished your morning meal?" Nadia answered, "We have. We were visiting whilst we waited your arrival." "Very well. Shall we go to the Royal Library and begin?" The suggestion erased a decade from her age. As we left Nadia's small garden home and entered the halls of stone, Solarine continued, "There was an empress in the Second Age, Kogo Felice, the second ruler of that age, I believe. She may be our best option to find your solution, though she was quite prolific." At the juncture of two halls, we turned right toward the library that lay deeper within the mountain, cooler, drier, and darker than the other areas of the castle, thus to better preserve the Nantai records. We passed two young attendants who moved to the side, showing deference to our royal station. I slowed and bade them each good morning, the action drawing confused and awestruck looks between the two. With a curtsy, the girl replied, "Good day to you, Lady Mairynne." The boy bowed. "And may the Triad watch over you." "And you as well." I smiled warmly to them both and continued on my path. It confounded me why people I'd spoken easily with not more than 2 moons before felt the sudden need for such extreme propriety. Yes, I expected the reaction, yet it still rankled. The fact I was now heir apparent didn't change who I was in my heart. From behind I heard, "Mairynne!" I turned to find my sister Karine and Imarizel moving with wind-swept speed toward the 4 of us. "Where have you been? I went to your chambers both last night and this morning, but found them empty." My sister wrapped me into her long arms. "We were worried." Over her shoulder, Imarizel stood stoically, almost judging, watching. When released, I asked, "We?" Karine made a small sound, but didn't answer directly. Nadia stepped closer. "Good morning, Karine. Mairynne. We'll get started inside." And with the few words, she, Corwine, and Solarine continued down the hallway and disappeared through the library's door at the end. "Did you have reason to meet with me, sister?" I asked. Softly, she said, "I bring some news you might find troubling. Gensui Northerngal has volunteered to lead Father's search party." "I am aware. We spoke about it yesterday." I lifted my chin higher, working to keep my manner even-keeled. "Ah, I see." Clearly, my first guard hadn't been as transparent with my dear sister as he had with me about the reasonings and his intent. It gave me some solace, but not enough. Have you gathered others? Or did he suggest others? And when do they propose to depart? I glanced again past my sister to the green-eyed beauty who accompanied her at seemingly all times lately. Something seemed different about Imrizel this morning, but I couldn't place it. Were the angles of her face a bit longer? Maybe she'd lost some weight. It would be understandable for one spending so much time with my sister. Careen answered. The party won't leave before the conclusion of the mourning period. I felt of different minds, relieved to have more time, devastated that a longer wait remained, and concerned whether Thalaja would find answers I needed in time. Trying to keep sincerity in my voice, I said, Wonderful. And the others? Imrizel and I will be working on finalizing those details today. May we share evening meal? I'll ask Yasmin to join us. Considering her request, I walked through the remainder of my day in my mind. After research here at the Royal Library, I needed to attend the common pyre grounds with Mother Feathergall. The last thing I wanted after that was to be in a position where I had to play politics. I countered. I'd like to dine with my family tonight. Alone. I looked meaningfully to my sister's advisor, the black lace blocking half of any emotion she might betray through her piercing eyes. Send word to Yasmin, and I'll have Mother Feathergalla and her new assistant prepare a table in my chambers. An objection started within my sister's throat, but died quickly. Of course. I'll see you in the evening, Careen. I turned and left my sister and her first advisor standing in the hall. Slowly, I expelled a breath, along with the tension I'd held within my lungs. Inside the library, the attendant greeted me in much the same manner as the young boy and girl in the hall, and pointed me to the small room where Solarine, Corwine, and Nadia had already started in on a stack of annals from the 5th Age. Nodding into her book as she read, Solarine looked up as I took my seat. I believe we've found your answer. A commoner's funeral carried far less ritual than one from the royal house. The family and close friends gathered and placed flowers around the body upon the pyre bed, then stood back. An acolyte of Attune dripped a drop of blessed water onto Jessa's lips. Selen's representative covered my friend's body with a white shroud to keep out the impure spirits. Then Otar's priest placed a knife upon her chest to drive away the evil as her soul lifted from the flame and went in search of her next life. In the closing measure, the family and friends each lifted a torch from a nearby fire and placed it under the pyre bed. We moved away and watched in silence. I wrapped an arm around Mother Feathergalla's shoulders, and we cried silently. I prayed to the Holy Triad that Jessamine's soul would be reborn among our people and find a happier end in her next life. Preparations for evening meal were well underway when Mother Feathergalla and I returned to my chambers. Roasted fowl scented the air, and my mouth watered. I moved to my bedchamber and released the braids from my hair as my attendant took charge. When I entered my main chamber, the new assistant to Mother Feathergalla, a young storm sorcerer by the name of Doreen, was putting the final touches on the table. She curtsied when she caught me watching. "Lady Mairynne," she said, and her cheeks pinkened. I smiled. "Continue with your business, Doreen." I wondered about the actual preparation of the food. In all my days, someone else had always prepared my meals, and it struck me now as a skill I might soon wish to have. Though I hadn't asked for the comforts royalty offered, it had been what I was born to as the daughter of the Nantai emperor and empress. I also wondered if my sisters had ever had occasion to roast a bird or bake a vegetable tart. Mother Feathergalla offered me warm glances as she worked, but remained mostly silent while tending to her duty. We'd shared another sad day over her daughter and my friend, and my heart ached for her as much as it did in the absence of Jessa herself. Mother Feathergalla filled the goblets, and as she poured, I asked, "Is it difficult?" She didn't look away from her task as she replied, "I'm sorry, dear. Is what difficult?" Making a meal. Cooking, I imagine. Her brows furrowed as she regarded me. When she stopped pouring the fourth and final cup, she stopped and leaned heartily onto the back of a chair with one elbow. It's like anything else, in truth. If you've learned the ways, it's a straightforward task. Why do you worry over such menial things? No reason to mention. I shook my head. Naught but curiosity. Quick rapping sounded on my door, and Doreen skipped over to answer. All three of my guests had arrived together. Before I went to welcome Nadia and my sisters, Mother Feathergullet told me they'd be available in the serving room down the hall, should we need anything else as we dined. She gave me a light hug and ushered Doreen from the room. "It smells fantastic," said Yasmin. Karine came to me and dropped a light kiss on my forehead. "Yes, Mairynne, you've outdone yourself." The credit goes to my attendants. I merely watched as they prepared the table. I exchanged a smile with Nadia. To have you all here tonight warms my heart. It's nice to be alone with my family. Come, let us eat. The earthy vegetable tarts were a delight, flaky crust melting on my tongue. Whatever ingredients went into the pastries outdid the juicy meat of the bird, but the two in combination made for a lovely flavor. I'd been hungrier than I'd known, and said little as I took my fill. When done, I turned to Yasmin at my left. "How have you been, sister?" "I'm doing as well as can be expected. Nestrine has been a comfort." She nearly exploded from her seat as she added, "He plans to ask for Sansari's blessing whilst we're at the High Cloud Court for your ascension." I sipped from my drink, wishing that I could be happier for my sister. It does seem that the two of you have grown even closer since Father disappeared. I put on a smile, but as I'd never been one to mask my thoughts, my tone carried notes of all the worry and pressure I'd been facing. Yasmin shifted in her seat, her eyes flicking between us all. "There's naught to worry over. In truth, I envy you and Nadia at having found a partner to whom you may turn for consolation." I fidgeted with the knife at my plate's edge. Everyone sat in silence until I changed the conversation's direction. "Anyway, since you mentioned the ascension, tell me, are the plans nearing completion?" "They are. We've sent invitations to the nobles from each caste, and I received word from the Stone Singers earlier today that your crown is almost complete. I expect your first journal to arrive at the Citadel from the Underhills tomorrow, just in time for the Triad to bless it before we depart for the High Cloud Court." She had done her job well, even though her motives lay elsewhere. At heart, she desired to gain an audience with Sansari, the Lady of Masks, and the Comtesse who regularly heard petitions in matters of courtly love. As for Karine, her task had been closer to my heart's desire, and I turned to my right, giving my attention to her. Without my asking, she began, "About Father's search party, Thalaja and I have arrived at a solid plan. I had yet to share with my sisters that I'd only be assuming the leadership of our people on a temporary basis. Likewise, my ultimate intentions remained my own, so I hung on Karine's every word, trying to weave together the final threads in my strategy. She went on, "After we return from court, Thalaja will lead a team of only 4 to the marshes. Solarine and Lucas have each named a junior member of their families who have agreed to make the journey, and the Gensui has chosen someone from the guard, apparently a tracker he trusts implicitly." A shadow of confusion passed over Karine's face, but she dismissed whatever it had been with a roll of her shoulder and continued, "I'm uncertain why Thalaja believes that visiting the people of Umbra is a key to finding our father, but he insisted. As he has given our family only reasons to trust his judgment, I will defer and give him the room to guide the journey as he feels necessary." Pressing my lips together, I nodded my satisfaction. I knew his reasons, but I knew him too, and he likely had an ulterior reason or motivation to keep his information quiet. For my part, I had no desire to violate the trust he'd placed in me by sharing. Immerisel has nominated a messenger from the Sandisgall family to travel with the party, so we may receive occasional word as to how the mission progresses. Karine concluded her update. Across the table, Nadia took the last bite of her tart, chewed, and swallowed. After a drink to wash it down, she said, "A messenger is a wonderful idea, don't you think, Mairynne?" Our aunt seemed pleased that we were discussing the matter as a family, and though sending word through the messenger's network seemed a risk, I had little argument about the logic. It was a wise measure to ensure those who remained within Storm's Keep would gain any significant information without having to wait for a traveling party to return and deliver the news. However, in truth, we didn't know what information they would find, and messengers tended to be voracious gossip mongers. Although I didn't voice concerns, my worry must have been clear in my expression. Karine rushed to add, "We will encode the messages. Only the search party will know the contents. A trusted messenger here at Storm's Keep will decode it and deliver it to you and the Royal Advisory Council." She took a drink from her goblet. "Speaking of your council, have you made your selections?" Karine's insistence that I nominate my counsel and first advisor made me itch, but she was merely the loudest voice speaking of the shared expectation. "I have," I answered easily, knowing that the council would not change, as I'd be speaking only the temporary oath under the watchful eyes of Attune, Otar, and Selene. I sighed. "It seems that everything is ready, despite that we should have been caring for our souls and mourning our mother. I suppose we have a duty to care for the Nantai in the wake of Father's disappearance as well. Sisters," I continued, "I thank you for spending this evening at my table. I'll let you go and attend to your own business. Tomorrow we will release the nymphs, and the day following we'll travel to the courts. I will ascend to the Serpentine Throne, and Yasmin will gain a fiancé. Despite our losses, we can celebrate her betrothal." When I stood, my sisters joined me. Yasmin thanked me for my kind words, and we exchanged a warm, sisterly embrace. Karine kissed both my cheeks and smiled warmly. "You are proving to be wiser than your years, little sister." Having put on the proper appearances for my sisters, I sighed my relief. My heart felt full in the moment of rare closeness. Maybe, given time, we'd regain some of the bonds we'd had as younglings. It would certainly go a long way to restoring a sense of normalcy, but my father's presence still called to me, and I had to answer that call first. Maybe my search would be fruitless, but at least I would be able to take comfort in the fact that I'd tried. Only then could I take the official oath and make my rule permanent. As a group, we walked toward the door. After farewells, my sisters parted and I turned to Nadia. "Will you join me for a cordial before you leave?" "Of course, darling." "Thank you." I motioned to the room adjacent to the door. "One moment. I'll have Mother Feathergall heat a bottle and bring it to us on the veranda." I stepped into the room where my attendants awaited and asked Mother Feathergall to prepare the cordials. Then Nadia and I went to my small outdoor seating area where we could enjoy the sounds of falling water. A few minutes later, my newest attendant, Doreen, appeared with 2 glasses of warmed fireflower wine and placed them on the small table between our chairs. "Thank you, Doreen," I said. She smiled and made her retreat. Selene had assumed her night's watch in the skies, and with her came a chill. I lifted the glass and held it between my palms. Nadia watched me skeptically as she retrieved her own cordial. After the first sip, she let out a little, "Ah." "Mairynne, why didn't you tell them you planned to take Moorwine's oath?" "I'm not certain." I drank my warm and spicy red wine, then looked at her with a brow raised and a smirk. "Mayhap I am young, Nadia, but my father named me his successor for a purpose. I hope you, unlike my sisters, don't believe tradition or expectation will so easily sway my mind." She flashed a knowing smile. "As your mother always said, you have a will unlike any other." The slightly reclined chair cradled me as I sank backward, allowing the fiery wine to warm me from the inside out. Eyes closed, I enjoyed the sounds of Storm's Keep, and peace so easily found on this balcony overlooking the castle grounds, the residences and markets below, and the walls that protected my people. With Nadia at my side, it felt as if some of my tension departed. I glanced over to see she had also found some ease or comfort in the quietness of twilight while sipping warmed ruby wine. She rolled her head toward me and said, "The business with Thalaja and the search party still troubles you." My aunt read me true. I had no desire for Thalaja to leave Storm's Keep, or for him to be away from me for however long the search might last. But his logic remained sound. The leader of the guard, with his time spent in the Unseen Guild, had the best and most unique qualifications over any other I could name. As if they knew my thoughts, the tokens around my neck changed suddenly. A hot pulse flared against my chest. I reached for them. Certainly, that they'd come to me was a calling, and I felt equally sure that the sudden change was a further signal of that calling. I would go. I had no idea how I'd convince Thalaja, and I knew the journey wouldn't be easy. Nevertheless, I would go. Nadia spoke, pulling me from afar. "Maybe you should put away those reminders, Mairynne." I shook my head, the twilight night coming back into focus. "The tokens trouble me, that is true, but how can I ignore them?" I searched her face, so like my mother's, for an answer she didn't have. "You're about to accept a heavy duty, even if it's only a temporary one, to the Nantai people. Do not allow the past to distract you. You must trust that if King Azarine lives, the Laja will see him returned." The ruby wine began to cool, and I finished what remained. Sitting forward, I gave her a warm smile. "It pleases me we found a way to connect again, dear aunt. I ask you, though, is that what you would do if you were in my position? Sit by and wait?" "That isn't a choice I will ever face." She looked into her wine, finished it, and turned back to me. "So unfortunately, I cannot say." Doreen came from my rooms to retrieve the glasses and asked if there was anything else she could bring. As I watched her leave with empty goblets, I said, "I must choose a first advisor. My sisters once thought me naive enough to choose Jessa." Nadia pursed her lips, then asked, "Would it have been so bad? She was loyal and cared for you a great deal." "Jessamine Feathergall was my oldest and dearest friend. In the deepest part of her heart, and much like her mother, she was little more than the sweetest of caregivers. She needed to grow up and find a partner to keep her safe, someone for her to nurture and give her younglings of her own to raise. She might have attended to my domestic needs for the remainder of her days and mine, but she would have never had the wisdom to offer advice on how I might best serve the Nantai people as their empress. And now someone has stolen the rest from her as well." I swallowed past a lump in my throat. After some silent contemplation, Nadia suggested, "Solarine would be a sensible selection." "Ah, yes, she would," I answered. "For that matter, Lucas Thundergala would likely offer some prudent guidance for a young empress. However, I do not wish to unwittingly steal from my father's counsel, and I believe I need to add supporters of my interests. Then we have Kareen and Imarizal, who have suggested I choose a Sandasgal." I scoffed and looked over my shoulder. Inside, behind where Nadia and I lounged, Doreen and Mother Feathergala cleared the remnants of our evening's meal, the sounds of stacking dishes punctuating the ongoing notes of the falls. I watched my aunt intently as gloaming turned to night and Zelen's moon began to shine. As my mother's twin, Nadia had been around royal proceedings since my father married my mother. Her simple presence with Tenyo Azarine and Kogo Noraline, as well as my mother's continued work, had afforded my aunt much knowledge about the Nantai people, as well as the small folk. I leaned closer and scrutinized her closely. As I have my own duty, I also have a duty to bestow upon you, dear aunt.